what I thought about talking about was the way that politics changed at the end of Paine's life, because I do think that the 1790s, it's a very peculiar decade in European history, and some of the assumptions that obviously we have, Jonathan at the start talked about some of the misconceptions that people have about this period and the simple relationships that are sometimes generated with the present. So obviously I'm going to say something which is historical, which is say it's really complicated, but what I really want to do is to try and explain what Paine left and how hard it was for the next generation of radicals especially after Paine died and through his final years. It connects with quite a lot of things that Jonathan said. It also connects with Steve's fantastic paper, because one of the lessons of the 1790s is that people turned away from Paine because of a general perception that Paine failed. And that's something that you have to acknowledge if you study this period. The perception, we think of the French Revolution as somehow, oh, what a wonderful event. So many of our ideas, obviously, Jonathan talked about Lynn Hunt's work and this, and rightly said, there's this book called Inventing Human Rights, and the argument goes, at the end of the 18th century, they invented human rights, and then there's a gap of 150 years. So, and I think that's dead right, and I'm going to try and explain some of the reasons why. Now, I'm going to do it with pictures, because I thought by this time of the day, the only way to do anything is with pictures. So this is a Thomas Rowlandson print. It's called Philosophy Run Mad. Many of you will have seen it before. 1792, it really indicates how people felt about the French Revolution, and the fact that they felt it was fraudulent, and the fact that they thought that it was failing. And that's one of the things about the French Revolution that you have to remember, that there's initially, obviously, again, Steve brought up Burke's Reflections on the Revolution. That's sometimes called a conservative work, and a work that attacks the French Revolution and says how dreadful it is and how we ought to be afraid of it. But you have to remember that Burke's Reflections on the Revolution in France is actually a really optimistic book. And it's an optimistic book because it says things are really terrible in France. They've got rid of the church, they've got rid of the monarchy, or they're getting rid of the monarchy, and they've undermined the aristocracy. All of these pillars of the state have gone, and it's going to fail. It has to fail. So Burke's actually optimistic in at the beginning of the 1790s, at the end of 1790, it's November 1790 that it appears. And Rowlandson here really captures the perception of the problems of the French Revolution. So, again, you'll have had time by now to have a look at it. The assignats, the fake paper money that really represents the bankruptcy of the state, the pretense of abolishing offensive war, whereas in fact they're invading all of the little states of Europe, and you'll see in the top right-hand corner Geneva, which is a place I'm very fond of. And the French, Geneva was one of the independent republics. It's not part of Switzerland at this time. It doesn't become a canton until 1815. And the French supposedly becoming a republic. It isn't a republic yet when this print was made, but presenting itself as a friend to the little states. Rowlandson is telling you, don't believe it. You know, they say that they're friends of mankind, but actually France is an imperial power. It's doing exactly the same as Louis XIV did, which is invading Europe, chopping it all up, and what does it leave? It shatters the columns of civilization. There's the pretense of universal benevolence, and actually dreadful things are happening, and we're left with obviously this stupendous monument of human wisdom. Now, there's one other thing that I really want to focus on, and again, it comes back to Jonathan's work from many years ago, because you'll remember when Jonathan was introduced that he wrote a series of path-breaking books which really said that you've got to take theology in the 18th century seriously because the British Isles, it was a Christian state looking backwards to the wars of religion. And if there was anything that was perceived to be positive about the 18th century, was that, especially associated with many people who supported the Church of England, they felt that what they'd achieved was to put an end to the wars of religion and the kinds of enthusiasm, 18th century word, and the kinds of wild, radical, transformative projects that led to acts of barbarism. And it's very significant that the way that the French Revolution is portrayed and the way that Paine particularly is portrayed is that the revolution in general is sending us backwards because it's returning to the kinds of religious enthusiasm, it's unleashing them in the modern world. So, whereas we obviously associate the French Revolution with rights of man, democracy, etc., for contemporaries, the worry, and it's a genuine worry, it's not just propaganda, the number of people who espouse this view are legion, and you can see it in the central motif, religious indifference. What does it lead to? Actually, it's leading, to exactly the kinds of wild behavior, the burning of priests that you associated with an earlier age. Now, Rowlandson, again, coming in 1793, is also optimistic, like Burke was, about what you get if you opt for French liberty and what you get if you stay with British liberty. And again, you might think, what a dull set of platitudes about the British Constitution. And you might think, what a silly set of statements to make about the French Revolution. It's just propaganda. But actually, what's interesting about it is that in the 1790s, you get an argument being made that's quite a new argument, and it's that Britain will survive as a state. Because actually, if there's a cause of the French Revolution, it is that most people in the 18th century thought that Britain was doomed. Nobody thought that Britain, it's too small, doesn't have sufficient natural resources, doesn't have the civilization of the French, and it's not going to maintain itself. Even so-called Anglophiles, people like Montesquieu, writing Spirit of the Laws, 1748, Montesquieu, Book 11, says Britain is the most free state that you've ever had in history, but it won't last. It won't last. Either it's going to go the way of the Romans, because the empire is going to be too big, or it's going to go the way of the Carthaginians, because it's so commercial, it's not going to be able to defend itself going into the future. And one of the works that, even though Adam Smith, who obviously we've talked about several times today, was quite phlegmatic about British prospects, he's much less pessimistic than his great friend David Hume, for example, who really thought Britain was finished, despite the victories of the 7 Years' War. Smith's Wealth of Nations, obviously published 1776, provided people like Paine with a set of arguments to demand something that was better than Britain. And the reason for that was that Smith defined what he called the mercantile system. And the mercantile system is obviously a corrupt economy. Smith thought that you could trace it back to what he called the unnatural progress of opulence. The unnatural progress of opulence is the fact that in Europe you had commercial society, production of luxury goods, etc., before you had fully commercialized agriculture. Whereas if you have what's called the stadial theory, 4 stages theory, it ought to go, if you have a natural progress of opulence, it really should go from the savage hunter-gatherer state to forms of agriculture based on domestication of animals, and then obviously crops being sowed, and you have property, and then you have the movement in commercial society. And Smith's point was that Europe, but particularly Britain, had undergone an unnatural progress of opulence. It's a very complicated story I haven't got time to explain, but I will say that he blamed the Crusades. Again, it's interesting, the focus on religion. Religion's important. He blamed the Crusades partly because he said that the city-states, especially the city-states of Italy, so especially at Genoa, Venice, became supremely wealthy on the back of transporting people to the Holy Land in order to fight, and that actually stimulates commercialization, unnatural forms of commercialization. Anyway, what you've got by the 18th century, according to Smith, is an economy that has problems. It's corrupt. Smith was used by a generation of radicals to attack aristocracy. The argument goes that a corrupt set of merchants and bankers have taken control of the economy, and look at the terrible effects. Obviously, Warren Hastings in India, look at the dreadful forms of corruption at home, and you get arguments for beginning to be developed in France, and obviously you can see them in Paine, saying that what you need to do is start anew. And you have to theoretically, you have to get rid of ranks entirely. And that is the very radical idea of the French Revolution. It's having a society without ranks. That's not something that's associated with so-called republican traditions, because if everybody knows about republics, is that you have an absolute hierarchy, you have a gradation. That's something that Rousseau says right at the start of the social contract. So what's interesting about some of the claims about British liberty in the 1790s is that actually perhaps it's stable, and it's the French version that is doomed. Now, you have to worry about reform. This is another Rowlandson. I'm not going to spend more than a minute really on it, but it shows again why you ought to be afraid of reform, and I'll just summarize by saying that obviously you have John Bull with his foaming tankard, and the French come along, they make promises to him, they end up, they cut off his leg, and they feed him frogs, and he becomes very, very thin, and they stamp on him. Now, you might think that, again, it's obviously it's entirely propaganda and paid for, but it reinforces a long-standing argument that made reform something that you had to fear. You had to fear reform in part because it could, the argument went, unleash the kinds of enthusiasm that recreated the excesses that were associated in European history with the wars of religion. So reform can reopen potentially the Reformation, all the kind of excess and violence that you had in the Reformation. That's one thing that you worry about with reform. It opens the door to that kind of enthusiasm. The other thing that you worry about in terms of reform is that historically, reform doesn't have a good press. The claim that is made time and time again is that if you have radical political change over a short period of time, you will have bloodshed, you will have violence, but you will always have the rise of a Caesar figure. Because if there is a law in politics, the claim many contemporaries say it time and time again, is that you let the people have authority. They're not ready for it because they've been corrupted by the corrupt society in which they've been brought up. Then they indulge in violence. They fall for demagogues, for the rhetoric of the gifted speakers. There is great disorder and ever greater corruption. and you have to rely on a military figure to put an end to it. It's also, the argument goes, it's tied to war, and it's tied to the establishment of empire, because one of the things that so-called democratic states, one of the ways that you keep them peaceful domestically is by creating an enemy. And obviously, you need to create an enemy, and one of the best ways of creating an enemy is fighting somebody and blaming them for all of your problems. So democracy, one of the myths, and coming back to one of the points that Jonathan made again, about R.R. Palmer's Age of the Democratic Revolution, which is an absolutely terrific book, but I think it has a terrible title because of the one thing that very, very few reformers are is Democrats. And actually, the ones who genuinely call themselves Democrats tend to be in the little republics of Europe. And when the French Revolution comes, because they don't believe that you can have a republic in a large state because you'll give the people an excessive amount of authority and they'll end up doing terrible things. So a lot of the Democrats, although they're Democrats and they have been Democrats for all of their lives and they believe in something called democracy, they end up being enemies of the French Revolution. It's just one of those nice ironies of history. Now, I'm going to jump over this one, which is, again, this is a very well-known print that really shows the dreadful consequences, again, of letting the French have their revolution. It's an Isaac Cruikshank's, and it is shows that what the French do if you let them give power to the people. And what they do is that they're going to put everybody into the army. And they're going to force people into the army. And the reason that they're doing that is because the only way that the state, the revolutionary state, can be stable is if they fight wars. So again, you have this association with between popular power and the fighting of wars and the dreadful violence that comes with it. I'm not going to spend any more time on that because I want to show you this James Gilray. Now, we're now in 1795, and 1795 is a really important year. It's a really important year because by that time, the French revolutionary armies are beating everybody. And it's something that did change the world. And it changed the world in lots of different ways, but an indication of the effects of 1794, 1795 is that Enlightenment, what you might call Enlightenment luminaries, people like Edmund Burke and Edward Gibbon, obviously the author of The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, and Burke himself, they are old men by this time, and they die very, very depressed because they cannot understand what the French Revolution is. Again, I said to you that Burke, in the Reflections on the Revolution, thought that the French Revolution was going to collapse. It was unstable. It wasn't something that could be maintained. The economy had collapsed. You've got rid of all the pillars of the state, etc. But rather than collapsing, France seems to be able to fight wars on every front. The French beat the Germans. There are worries that the British are going to go the same way. And Burke, if anybody has read Burke up to his death, it's certainly not. It's again the argument that Burke's a conservative is really farcical when you look at his final writings, because he says there's nothing left to conserve. You know, my Europe's gone. The Europe that I loved. It's been completely demolished by the French Revolution. And he says things are so bad that there'll very well might be a revolution in Ireland. Obviously there is in 1798. But also he survives. He dies only a couple of months after the mutinies, the naval mutinies at Spithead and the Nore. And he said there's a great possibility that the French invading force will be transported across the Channel by the Royal Navy. Now, Burke, brilliant writer, sometimes exaggerates, but there's no question that he thought his world had gone. So the French Revolution, from initially the expectation was that it was going to fail, by 95 the expectation is that something new has been created. And you have Gilray showing these, Fox and Sheridan and Stanhope, the supporters of peace with revolutionary France, and he, like Burke, attacking what they called a regicide peace, obviously a peace with a terrorist state, said, we shouldn't do it. Because look what it's done. The Constitution, Britannia is a supplicant, Magna Carta is on the floor, and you're at the edge of a cliff. And there we have the French, the monster, sitting on a giant bomb, because what French liberty represents is war. And that's very significant when you think about Paine, because Paine obviously came from the other side, and one of the arguments that Paine was making, certainly in the second part of the Rights of Man and in his work after, is that the revolution in France, whereas you would have expected it to have been transported to Britain, that hasn't happened, and therefore steps need to be taken in order to get rid of the force that is preventing the transition into this world of sister republics that can create welfare states, because you don't have to spend money on armaments, because you'll have a world of peace rather than massive government expenditure and debt on endless war. So Paine's transition mechanism by the mid-1790s, by Rights of Man Part 2, is to say that the only solution to the problem of the corruption of the world is to get rid of the source of the corruption, and the only way you can do it is by all-out war against Britain. And Paine's argument that war is a means to republican peace, is a means to a better world, needs really to be emphasized, because it shows how realistic Paine was. The only way to get rid of corruption, it hasn't happened naturally. He has lots of reflections on that, but you have to have war. That's the transition mechanism. Obviously for Burke, it's the other way around. You have to have war to the death against revolutionary France, because it represents all that is bad, and it's destroyed the existing state of Europe and all that was good about it. Now, I'm not going to show you that, and I'm not going to show you, that's not the Gruffalo. It's another representation of the Gorgon that is revolutionary France. But I want to finish really by talking about Bonaparte, because Bonaparte's a significant figure for Paine, because, as many of you will know, he's very attracted to him. And the idea of being part of Bonaparte's invasion fleet to finally destroy the British Gorgon and helping to design the boats and supporting people like Wolfe Tone for the invasion of Ireland, it's something that Paine thinks increasingly is the only way, potentially, that you're going to create this republican future for the world. And obviously, the Paine in the 1790s, I think Paine changes because he thinks in the earlier versions of Paine, the Paine of Common Sense, I don't think when he wrote Common Sense, what would be the point of imagining a universally peaceful republican world? It just wasn't something you could imagine. It could be imagined in the 1790s because of the remarkable success of French arms, and that's obviously why he has this idea of a transformed world. But if he was optimistic in the middle in 1795, and obviously he's praising the Directory and talking about the first principles of government and saying that the French Constitution of 1799 of 1795 is remarkable. By the end of the decade, Paine and the revolutionary generation, they're much, much more pessimistic. Because obviously, what happens to the French Revolution is that it looks, and this is again one of the historical ironies of the 1790s, if you died, as Gibbon and Burke did, between 1794 and 1797, you thought that the French Republic was something new in human history. You thought that the French Republic was something new in human history because it had done something that no other republic had done, which was beat everybody at war. If Burke and Gibbon die really depressed, they can't understand why their world has gone and this new world of democracy and the power of the people and massed armies defeating professional troops, can't understand it. Had they lived a couple more years, you would get a bit of optimism on the part of the so-called reactionaries coming back, and it's really illustrated by this. It's one of the most complicated prints. It's another Gilray, as you'll probably have recognised. It's from 1800, and it's reinforcing a message about democracy. And the message about democracy is that if you let ordinary people rise, you give them, democratic innocence in Corsica, Bonaparte's grotesque family. You pay for them to have a royal education in the École Militaire at Paris. Your democratic gratitude is that you turn on the people who've paid for your education. Your democratic religion is that you have no morals in politics. You pretend that you are a Muslim in order to get the support of the Ottomans. You abandon, we're now at the bottom left, you abandon your army, a democratic courage, in Egypt because you know if you don't go back to Paris, you might lose power. And then you turn yourself into an emperor. You put an end to the republic, you put an end to any notion of democracy, and at least you have troubled sleep because you think of all of those who you've caused to die while you've been rising. So what it reinforces is that what happened in the case of the French Revolution is that it starts off being something that can be explained because it'll fail. It goes through a middle period when French arms Republican arms are victorious, and then finally you can almost see the relief of the commentators. 1799 to 1800, obviously by 1804, they make the argument that Paine failed and that it's just another democratic revolution. It's just another revolution that gave power to the people, and what's it ended up as? The rise of a Caesar, the rise of a Cromwell. This time it happens to be Bonaparte. And Bonaparte obviously was presented as a friend to Republicans and was as venerated as this great popular Republican general. But actually, the end result is that you've got back to political normality. And political normality means avoid radical change, reinforce the message that if you have the kinds of radical political experiment that Paine was involved in, what you will get is violence and potentially a return to the excesses that were associated with the Reformation. And that's why the early 19th century is so tough. I mean, there's a book, I can't remember the author, who's written a book called it's about the lost generation of political radicals, the people who got into bed with Paine and who end up really depressed and not having any faith in politics because they think that the French Revolution genuinely failed. It failed because it confirmed all of the prejudices that people had inherited about what happens when you have an enthusiastic project. Now, that also means that the early 19th century is very interesting. And again, coming back to Steve's paper, I think what's really interesting in terms of the interest in the Saxon constitution, one of the reasons, which obviously Steve's has already said, one of the reasons that you'd want to go back to the Saxon constitution and try and create histories that say, oh, we did have stable democratic constitutions for long periods in British and English history, you want to make that argument because then you're making the argument that you don't have to have the French Revolution, that there's an alternative to the French Revolution, that you can have peaceful reform and it's not associated with the kinds of excesses that you've seen in the 1790s. Now, that's why, obviously, as everybody knows, Paine himself, tragically, dies depressed. Obviously, he accuses Adams and Washington of having a terror in North America. He said, Paine obviously wrote that it was equivalent to the terror at Paris. And that's obviously why, again, other than still supporting the invasion of England, he doesn't write that much in his final years. But in some ways, he maintains the cause and the project. It's very interesting that the person that Paine is most associated with in France, which is the Abbé Sieyès, even though actually they disagree about the nature of a republic, the Abbé Sieyès, who was the great, obviously wrote Qu'est-ce que le tiers-état? If there was a person who planned the French Revolution, it was Sieyès. Sieyès stops writing in 1799, creates the consular constitution, makes Bonaparte first consul, Sieyès is second consul, still believes in the great cause of abolishing aristocracy and creating a moral commercial society. Bonaparte makes him a senator, gives him lots of land north of Paris. He ends up as Baron Sieyès, and he doesn't write anything between 1800 and 1836. So this is supposed to be, he's still praised as founder of modern republicanism, Sieyès. And there's lots and lots of political science literature that says how remarkable Sieyès was. But actually, he was somebody who thought that the things that he'd done had failed so obviously that there was nothing else to say. So I think he's an example, very rare case of a political author who, having been venerated as a sage and a seer and a prophet, was somebody who then goes silent, which I think says a lot about the way that he saw the way that the French Revolution moved. So, very, very final point. What's interesting when you've got the rise of Bonaparte, you've also got other really depressing facts if you are a political radical. The first depressing fact is obviously that the French Revolution went the way that it did. The second really depressing fact is that Britain survived. Nobody could, again, if all of the 18th century luminaries, if you'd asked them which state will have collapsed, especially if it faces European war and bankruptcy by the early 19th century, they would all have said Britain. The fact that Britain survives is very peculiar. The worst thing still, which you can see in the writings of the radicals in the early 19th century, again, it's something that Steve covered, you can see that the worst thing of all is that the mercantile system, the corrupt economy that Smith said was dreadful, it succeeded. The British used the mercantile system, go into ever more debt, pay for the armies of ultimately, obviously, Austria and Prussia and Russia to fight Bonaparte on every front and ultimately defeat him. And that's why early 19th century thought, I think, after Paine, is so interesting, because it's obsessed with the fact that the revolution failed. It's obsessed with trying to explain how the most corrupt state on earth in terms of a commercial society that's on the edge of bankruptcy managed to survive. And that's why the period after the revolution, once you accept the nature of the revolution, is as interesting as it is. I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Any questions for Richard? Thank you for that, Richard. Brilliant. Well, lots of hands. You first, then you.
Can you say a few words about Napoleon and the career open to talents, and the fact that throughout Europe, from Ireland to Bulgaria, you've got folk songs incorporating great man rising to power, and that everywhere in Europe, the person you meet in the asylums is someone who pretends to be claims he's Napoleon.
Yeah.
How long does this last?
I think in some ways it's still with us, because, and that's a very good question, because Bonaparte, there's another side to Bonaparte, obviously. You know, why is Bonaparte so successful? How does Bonaparte present himself? Bonaparte presents himself as Charlemagne, you know, and that means giving power to all of the little states of Europe, creating a genuine continent that's connected, where you have genuinely European armies. I mean, Bonaparte's army is unbelievably cosmopolitan, you know, Irish regiments, and right across the Balkans there's regiments that fight for Bonaparte. So, you know, obviously the British portray Bonaparte as your standard Cromwell or Caesar, but the notion that you can have, I mean, again, it's back again, Jonathan talked about Bolingbroke and the idea of a patriot king. Actually, there's a Republican version of a patriot king, you know, elected presidents. And Bonaparte, obviously, having the plebiscite to support the transition to empire. We do like powerful figures who claim that they will solve all our problems, but they tend to arise in the aftermath of revolutions. They still do, and you can understand why. So I think actually you still get, I mean, again, a lot of the Republicans in the early 19th century, I mean, Richard Carlisle's a good example, still an awful lot of praise for Bonaparte. You know, as actually if he'd won, we would have been a lot better, because he was still on the side of the revolution. He embodied revolutionary values, obviously the Code Napoleon, bringing liberty everywhere, being welcomed. So it's not the case that we should accept this view that Bonaparte couldn't be seen as a Republican. And I think that, you know, that's why your question is very, very good.
Yep.
Had Napoleon succeeded, not been defeated, do you think his union of Europe would have succeeded to this day?
No. Because, I mean, you know, Bonaparte does really terrible things. And again, there's one of the wonderful things about this period in terms of political literature especially, I mean, the trial of Jean Peltier, who's a royalist who's defended, who Bonaparte, during the Peace of Amiens, obviously the short period of peace, Bonaparte puts pressure on the British government because Peltier has been libeling Bonaparte and calling him a tyrant. And so the French, because they're now at peace with the British for a very short period, they put pressure to have him tried. And you can see that right across Europe by 1803, 1804. If you take people like Benjamin Constant, you know, who later writes about liberty of the ancients, liberty of the moderns, Jean-Baptiste Say, who's a political economist who Bonaparte invites in because he's written a treatise on political economy, and Bonaparte thinks he knows that Say, as a good Republican, hates the British, absolutely hates the British, thinks the British are the worst thing ever, therefore would Say rewrite his treatise of political economy as a Bonapartist tract. But by that time, Say and Constant and Madame de Staël, lots of their friends, they've been so harassed by the Bonapartist secret police that they don't think it's worth it. So actually, you know, there's still lots of people who have positive things to say about Bonaparte, but, you know, Bonaparte, again, having somebody who creates all these republics and then puts his own family into them as new monarchs, you know, it would have been a real achievement to keep it going.
Thank you. Would you first and then you?
Yeah, I mean, developing the ideas. Zhou Enlai, the Chinese foreign minister back in the 50s and 60s, was once asked about what he thought the impact of the French Revolution was. And it is said that his reply was, but it's too early to tell.
Yeah.
I've got some sympathy with that, in the sense that I wonder whether even some of the things that have happened more recently, like the European Union, is actually a manifestation of some of the influence of the French Revolution. I wonder what you think about those sorts of issues, you know, the free movement of labour and so on, and the idea of Europe as a concept.
Yeah. In some ways, I'd leave questions like that to Alistair. But what I would say is that there's lots of nonsense talked about the French Revolution, and I think what's interesting about the French Revolution is that pretty much every single person who was an actor in the French Revolution, those who survive, spend the rest of their lives trying to explain why it failed. It failed. How can you therefore be a reformer given that you've lived through a period where the French Revolution destroyed reform? You know, why do we only have the Reform Act in 1832? And obviously the Reform Act in 1832 is small beer because of the French Revolution. So does that mean the French Revolution was a bad thing? No, it just means that anybody who advocates reform, I think in other words what I'm saying is that the French revolutionaries are not that interesting because they failed. The next generation of radicals are the really interesting ones because they had to build their reform projects on an absolute acknowledgement that the French Revolution failed, and that the first thing that you have to do as a reformer is to avoid enthusiasm, avoid violence, avoid the rise of Caesar figures. You know, that's what reform is about. And if you don't do that, it's not worth it. So, and so that, I think that is the lesson of the 18th century to the 19th century. Actually, again, there's been recent work, a chap called Eric Nelson wrote a book called The Royalist Revolution about the American Revolution, claiming that the American Revolution was much more of a revolution against Parliament rather than against the figure of the monarch. And there's lots of interpretations of the British Constitution, because people that ask the question, you know, okay, we're really depressed if the model state that you've got at the beginning of the 19th century is not France, it's Britain. You know, if the most corrupt commercial society on earth is suddenly your model because it's the only one that's stable and you can avoid terror, and at least you'll have some property left, then if that's your model, it's really, really depressing. And so lots of people try and explain, well, why did it succeed? And that's very, very interesting as well. So in other words, there's the stories that come out of the French Revolution. One of them is, why do people venerate the French Revolution? And I don't know. Because to me, although, yeah, venerate it, it's remarkable. Obviously, I've spent decades trying to understand it, and I'm still not there. So I'm sympathetic, but I don't I think it's wrong. The people who say it still has lessons because it's so remarkable, I think the more interesting lessons are after it finishes and after it fails.
Okay. John.
Thank you so much for that talk. That was excellent and hugely persuasive. Can I just raise one question there? You argued that by 1795, Paine had sided with the idea that war was the only route to Republican virtue. And I think we can agree that that's not what he said in Rights of Man in 1791.
Yep.
But do you think that that position was actually also present in Paine in 1776 in respect of a revolution which indeed quite shortly does succeed?
That's again, it's a really good question. I mean, I think that obviously, as lots of people in this room know, Paine in 1776 is trying to make the argument that we can defeat the British and that actually they're not going to bring the naval power to bear because, and even if they did, we'd be able to, we potentially would be able to defeat them. Obviously, the reality, which is one of the interesting things about the American Revolution, is that they know that the only way that they can actually survive is through the power of France. And obviously through the French lending as much money as they do, and obviously with Lafayette and the French troops going to support the American Revolution, obviously it can be seen, and I'm sure Paine was aware of this, as a revolution that succeeds because of the support of the old autocrats in Europe. So obviously the Spanish and the French and obviously the Dutch get involved as well. So obviously the Dutch are not old autocrats because it's a republic. Well, a set of republics. So I think that at that time, I think there's two Paines, I suppose. I think there's more than two Paines, but I think there's two Paines. There's the Paine of the American Revolution, and although lots of people say with regard to the American Revolution, such as Eric Nelson, who I think is an absolutely terrific historian, he says, right from the start, the American revolutionaries were thinking in universal terms. And they thought that obviously the cause of America is the cause of mankind. In a much more concrete sense than we're an asylum for the Europeans. Whereas I think that the founding fathers thought that America was special because it was completely different to Europe. Obviously I don't want to tell you this, because there's so much land, so potentially it could be a classical republic because you can have citizens who own land, and you have slaves to do the hard work, so it could genuinely be a classical, the only example of a classical republic in the modern world, in North America, and obviously classical republicanism needed slavery, that's an accepted argument for many people, obviously not everybody. And also the argument that North America doesn't have to be a militarized state because it doesn't have any natural enemies around it. The Canadians are not going to invade. And obviously nor are the Spanish from the south, and obviously there's an indigenous population story to tell, but then in other words they don't have to have a standing army. They can rely on the militia, and therefore they don't have to invest so much in having a military force. So in other words, the circumstances of North America are so different to Europe that I think that all radicals in Europe didn't really think there was much to learn from America because the circumstances are so completely different. By the time you get the 1790s, Paine too, the French Revolution's happened, and nobody can understand that this experiment is as successful as it is. It's remarkable, and it's generating so much popular support. That's the opportunity to think in universal terms, and then that goes wrong, and therefore you have to have a universal war against the cancer, and the cancer is Britain. So I think the North Americans didn't think they had to destroy Britain, and obviously actually many of the founding fathers, Adams and Franklin and co, are very, very positive about Britain, and they think the American Revolution succeeded and the French failed. Obviously Franklin's dead by that time, but it's an argument so with John Adams especially, that the American Revolution was different to the French Revolution and didn't have a terror. Obviously Paine disagreed with that. Didn't have a terror because of the inherited British mores, common law, etc., tradition of moderation. So again, I think the thing about this period is that most political ideas are only consistent for a few years. And so I think the Paine transition mechanism is war, is a product, exactly as you say, really setting parts of the rights of man up to, well, I mean, he maintains it, obviously, he's really happy that the Peace of Amiens ends and that it fails, and that they're going back to war, and that Britain is still being fought right up to his death. So I hope that isn't the full answer, but it's a bit of a one.
Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you.